conditions in Western Europe are relatively stable, but insurers are vying for the same business and are increasingly having to resort to merger and acquisition activity. I'm Yvette Essen for AM Best TV, and I'm joined by Greg Carter, Managing Director of Analytics for AM Best. Can we first of all talk about the types of companies that we rate in Western Europe? How would you describe them? Are they relatively diverse?
There is a great diversity across the portfolio of companies that we rate in Europe. We rate some of the large multinational global companies operating in many countries and many lines of business, down through a series of mutuals, some specialist companies, some P&I clubs, reinsurers, monoline writers, a really broad mix, a cross-section of the insurance community.
One thing that companies did have in common was their outlook, and at the beginning of this year, some 89% of our ratings in this region were actually at that stable level. Can you tell me about the market conditions that the companies are facing?
Western Europe is a very mature, stable environment. The markets have been well developed and tend to grow broadly in line with GDP, which has been steady if not exciting growth in recent years. So most companies have learned to cope with the current market conditions. They're well prepared for the bumps that have appeared along the road, and therefore most of them carry stable outlooks.
One trend that we have noticed in recent years is the merger and acquisition activity. Do we expect industry consolidation to continue, and what is driving mergers?
Well, let's start with what's driving merger and acquisition activity. It's typically it is a reflection of that maturity of the market. Many of the companies have operated through a stable period. They've grown their balance sheets. They're regulated to a high degree of solvency, and many of them are in effect carrying excess capital over and above what they would require to run their business at an optimum level. And in those situations, companies will look at ways to utilise that capital more efficiently. And with limited growth prospects for the marketplace, M&A is a very logical starting point. And so we've seen that in recent years. We've seen companies trying to achieve economies of scale, trying to squeeze efficiencies out of their business, and trying to exert more influence over the markets in which they operate. So in the absence of other ways to utilise that capital to a great degree, I would expect M&A activity to continue for some time.
Besides M&A, what other topics do you think people will be talking about with regards to this sector in the year ahead?
Well, one hot topic at the moment has been the timetable for IFRS 17. It's been a long time coming. But we finally seem to be settling on a date, although there's still industry pushback and a desire for a greater grace period to implement IFRS 17. But it does seem that we are going to reach a landing on that fairly soon, and that does have some significant implications, more so for the life companies or the long-term writers. So that's a topic that is exercising management currently. And we've seen a number of other factors as well that the industry has focused on. So, for example, ESG as a significant focus for companies, particularly how they present themselves to their stakeholders.
You mentioned ESG there, environmental social governance. Why do you think that is increasingly going to be important in the year ahead?
We've seen the importance of that subject rise in recent times as stakeholders from across the industry have focused on how companies interact on those subjects. And we've seen companies react in different ways to raising the levels and the disclosure of their ESG policies. It's clearly something that is high on the agenda for companies today, and we expect it to influence how companies manage themselves and how they present themselves going forward.
AM Best has recently published a report looking at trends within the Western European sector. A copy of that report can be found on ambest.com. For AM Best TV, I'm Yvette Essen.